Chapter 30:19, A Raccoon for a Prince. 4. The few tricks she displayed were skills known by the former god of creation. They were extremely complex, so Di Fui looked surprised and clapped his hand to compliment her. It is such a complex trick. Shijiu, I never expected you to learn this without a teacher. Gu Shijiu was feeling even more egotistical. Yeah, I did not expect it as well. In fact, since entering the desert, I feel that I have self-learned a lot of things. They are not only limited to martial arts but also cooking and embroidery. She used her fingers to count the number of skills she was proficient in now and finally said, I will show you the rest next time when we are free. Di Fui looked at her shiny eyes and sighed. I didn't expect this desert to make you even more talented. It seems that it is a good place. Why don't we stay here for a longer period? Perhaps, you may even acquire other skills. Gu Shijiu frowned and spoke her mind, no. I hate it here. Di Fui looked around and replied, although it is desolate here, there is nothing wrong with the place. You can practice your techniques here. Anyway, why do you hate the place? Gu Shijiu was stunned by his response and said, I don't like desolate places, not to mention that how air got injured here. I already dislike the place. Her lie was still airtight. Di Fui did not doubt her. After he checked her pulse and confirmed that she was fine, he let go of her hand and said, if that is the case, then you should rest well. We still need to break out of this place with how air. I'm afraid that we will have to use a lot of strength later. Gu Shijiu nodded. Okay. She paused for a moment before continuing, I have been trapped here for many days, but I finally found a little doorway out. I will bring you there later. Di Fui smiled and just reiterated his earlier point. You should rest well first. He raised his hand and pulled out a furry soft blanket and placed it on Gu Shijiu. Gu Shijiu reached out and tried to hold him. Can you rest here together with me? Di Fui patted her little hand and answered, no, I am not tired. Nevertheless, you should rest. I will look around and see if I can find out the mechanism here in advance so that I can bring you how air out earlier. This broken place is not suitable for recovery. Gu Shijiu naturally agreed, so Di Fui got up and left. Gu Shijiu watched him from behind as he left, and her eyes seemed to be glowing. This man was finally hers. She squinted at her little hand and looked at her body again before smiling at the big stone where Gu Shijiu was sealed. She spoke to her in a leisurely voice, you have a good body. I will make sure to use it very well. You can rest assured. Her fingers stroked her arms and her chest before she joyfully remarked, it's excellent to have a real body. It's unusually sensitive, unlike the body that I condensed for myself using blood and flesh. Rest assured, I will make good use of this body and will love the man wholeheartedly. The directed audio she used was no ordinary means of communication, it was a technique that could only be used in this desert. She was trapped here for 100,000 years and finally made the desert one with her. The few thousand grievances in the desert could be commanded as she wanted, so she used a unique method to use them to send her voice to Gu Shijiu. She did not even need to say anything out loud. Once her mind thought of something she wanted to convey, it could automatically pass it to the intended recipient. Di Fui would not be able to hear it. In fact, aside from Gu Shijiu, no one else would be able to hear the message. Hence, it was a safe means of communication. Published at 29th of May 2028 40:06 AM Chapter 30:20 Gu Shijiu, who was still inside the water prison, seemed to be getting desperate. She closed her eyes and no longer bothered to converse with the inner demon. She just let the black water drown her over and over again. Sponsored content. Remove ads. 2 hours passed quickly, and Di Fui had come back. He carried Di Hao with him and said, Shijiu, let's go. Alright. As Gu Shijiu got up, she subconsciously moved to his side and held his arm as she walked with Di Fui and Di Hao. As they were passing the boulder, Gu Shijiu subconsciously looked at the stone again. She saw the real Gu Shijiu just emerge from the black water and coincidentally watched them pass her. She clearly saw that the trio was going to leave. This time, her eyes finally showed panic and despair. As expected, Gu Shijiu tried to add to her misery. Shijiu, we are going now. You stay here. Rest assured, in order not to disturb your leisurely time here, I will seal this place and no longer let anyone enter. You can stay here for thousands of years. Gu Shijiu looked at the shadows of the three people gradually disappear and felt as though she could no longer carry on. Sponsored content. Remove ads. The demon was impersonating her too well and was even using her body now. Since the imposter used to be part of her past self, she naturally assimilated with the body very easily to the point where even Gu Shijiu herself would not be able to tell that something was off. Furthermore, Di Fui had just arrived, so he was not familiar with the desert. He did not know what had been happening and had no idea who was the real culprit behind everything. It was certainly easy to fool him now. Given the state of events, Gu Shijiu started to entertain the fact that she might be trapped here forever while the demon would use her body and live happily ever after with her husband and kids. The sheer possibility that this could happen made Gu Shijiu tremble in agony. She clenched her fists as she watched the three of them walk away. She was really desperate, and tears started to flow down her cheeks involuntarily. Sponsored content. Remove ads. Right at that moment, the black water rose again and submerged her completely. This time, she did not set up a wizardry barrier, so the hot black water burned her again. She trembled in pain, but she was too tired to struggle. If she were going to be trapped here for the rest of her life, she would rather have her soul dissipated. She gradually became dizzy under the water, and oddly, the pain did nothing to keep her awake. Sometimes, dying was the easier option. Since Gu Shijiu was a great deity, she could condense her soul into a solid form that was no different from a real body. She would not even age or die. However, this was only useful if she had the desire to live. Despite being a great deity, if Gu Shijiu really wanted to end her life, she could exercise a technique to make her soul dissipate. Sponsored content. Remove ads. As she was now full of despair, she had the desire to die and dissipate her soul. She did not want to suffer any longer and live here endlessly. Mother! Mother, do not leave Shiyue, Mother! Don't give up! When she was about to exercise the technique of dissipating her own soul, she heard a few shouts. They were from her two kids. There was fear in Di Ziyu's voice, and she sounded like she was crying. Meanwhile, Di Hao's voice rang like a morning bell in her ear and shook her to the core. She opened her eyes in an instant, and subconsciously looked around. She was still in the black water prison, but there was no trace of Di Shiyue or Di Hao. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Note, please download the sponsor's game to support us. Chapter 3021, A Raccoon for a Prince, 6, perhaps, the two of them were just an illusion after all. Little Shiyue should be safe in the palace of the Ninth Haven. But Di Hao. Gu Shijiu suddenly had cold sweat. If she guessed correctly, the boy she saw earlier was not the real Di Hao. He was probably missing or locked away somewhere. Otherwise, Fan Qianxue would not disappear so silently. After all, he was the god of creation. No one could get rid of him so easily. Therefore, the most likely possibility was that Fan Qianxue and Di Hao were both imposters or illusions designed to fool her. As Di Fui managed to escape from the inner demon's earlier trap, perhaps she decided to be more cautious this time around. Thus, she made the fake Fan Qianxue disappear but was sure to keep Di Hao around to make a more convincing case. Frankly, the demon only wanted to have Di Fui to herself. Hence, it was unlikely that she would harm him. However, she might not show any mercy to Di Hao and Di Shiyue. After all, this demon hated the original Gu Shijiu. With her amazing abilities, it would not be a surprise if she decided to make a fake Di Hao and Di Shiyue and kill her two children. When this thought arose in her heart, Gu Shijiu even noticed that there was sweat on her nose. A woman was weak, but a mother was naturally strong. If ordinary women could still live for the sake of their children, a lot more would be expected of Gu Shijiu. She could not give up. She had to try to get out of here to save her two children. Even though the demon could use her body and act like her, it was impossible to hide it from the eyes of Di Fui. Her personality and character were surely different from the demon. Therefore, as time passed, Di Fui would find out the truth and would try to save her. It was just a matter of time. Hence, she had to be strong and find a way to escape. She began to explore the Blackwater prison carefully as she did not believe that there would not be a way out. She was an expert in breaking wizardry barriers, so as long as she caught one loophole in the prison, she would be able to break out. The Blackwater prison was not small at all. From her point of view, it was the size of more than 10 houses. Although it was full of black water, the temperature was not the same at every location. Some places could burn people's skin, and some areas were just hot, but within an acceptable range. Gu Shijiu gritted her teeth and decided to swim to the hottest place in search of a clue. If this Blackwater prison had an escape route, she believed that it must be hidden in the least accessible spot. The more dangerous the area, the more likely it was to be there. Summoning her courage, Gu Shijiu took a leap of faith and searched the hottest area. Suddenly, she sensed something. She looked up and was shocked. She saw Di Fui standing outside the prison. From Gu Zijia's perspective, she was sure that he was looking inside the boulder for something. Gu Shijiu was stunned for a while and rushed forward to him. Fui. However, Di Fui did not look at her. Perhaps, he could not see her. Although his eyes were looking inward, he did not look at her. Gu Shijiu could hear the sounds from outside, so she heard him whisper. It should be this stone. He took a turn around the stone, and from Gu Zijia's perspective, he had done the same to the prison. Shijiu, are you inside? Don't be afraid. Di Fui pressed his palm on the stone and passed a directed audio to her. He actually noticed it. He was indeed her husband. Regardless of how the demon disguised as her, he was still aware of it. He came to save her. The sudden glimpse of hope brought elation to Gu Shijiu. She only felt that her nose was slightly sore now. Although she was still in the hot black water, her feelings of desperation, fear, and suicide disappeared without a trace. She smiled and put her hand on the wall as if trying to touch his hand. Fui, I am here. Published at 30th of May 2022 40:07 AM Chapter 3022, 3022 Di Fui naturally could not hear her, but he left his palm on the stone for a moment to try to sense for any abnormalities. Nevertheless, he still could not feel anything. The boulder seemed ordinary to him, and there was nothing special about it compared with the rocks surrounding it. Sponsored content. Remove ads. He was sure that this was the one that he needed to explore, so the more she did not respond, the more worried he became. Di Fui took a deep breath to try to gather his thoughts. He believed that his instincts would not be wrong. He had noticed the woman, who currently occupied Gu Zijia's body, constantly looking at it. Feeling confident that this was where Gu Shijiu was locked away, he knew that he could not blindly break the rock so as not to hurt her. He quickly thought of all the spells related to sealing away a person's soul into a stone and tried all of them, one by one, to see if he could get Gu Shijiu out. His fingers seemed to be casting spells non-stop with light emerging from his hand and covering the boulder. However, they were all useless. Unfortunately, the stone was still standing there firmly without any change. It seemed that none of the spells could free Gu Shijiu. Sponsored content. Remove ads. Meanwhile, Gu Shijiu was still suffering inside the stone. She knew that Di Fui would know the way to save her. Although the spell he issued made the black water even hotter on the inside, she kept quiet the entire time and waited for the man to come up with the solution. Nonetheless, since the temperature had greatly risen, Gu Shijiu started to feel dizzy. It seemed that the demon had put a unique wizardry barrier around the boulder to prevent anyone from trying to save her. The more people attempted to try to break the wizardry barrier, the worse the condition for the victim they were trying to rescue. The demon seemed to have thought of everything. She suspected that someone might try to save Gu Shijiu, so she had come up with such a unique way to make her life more difficult. Even in her dizzy state, Gu Shijiu continued to watch Di Fui's actions on the outside. She saw him continuously change the technique he used to break the wizardry barrier. Although these techniques were useless, they certainly consumed a lot of energy. She could see that his forehead was now drenched in sweat. She knew that he must be drained, as he had been looking for Di Hao and even used a forbidden move to rush over here. Not to mention that he had to handle the demon's avatar as well before treating Di Hao's wounds. Sponsored content. Remove ads. He must be exhausted. Gu Shijiu looked at his slightly pale face and was very distressed. She wanted to stop him, but she could not pass any information out of the water prison. She was very anxious to the point where a thought suddenly flashed through her mind. Since the demon was from her own body, the skills that she knew should have also come from her. Perhaps the former Gu Shijiu knew the solution to this water prison. When the thought flashed through her mind, there seemed to be a spell that she vaguely remembered that popped in her mind as well. Although it passed through her mind fairly quickly, Gu Shijiu was quick enough to catch it. However, when she was about to cast it, she realized that she could not remember it anymore. Perhaps that was the way to break out of this water prison. Sponsored content. Remove ads. She closed her eyes again and tried to shut out the pain so that she could concentrate on her thoughts. When she was calm enough, she used a secret technique to track the thoughts that passed through her mind recently. Opportunely, her effort paid off as the spell flashed through her mind again. This time, she remembered half of the spell. There was hope. She was about to try again, but her ears suddenly heard a loud crashing sound. It scared her for a moment, and she quickly opened her eyes. She was stunned. Di Fui. Di Fui actually. He actually came in. The man looked shocked, as he obviously did not expect inside the stone to be in this condition. He was clearly terrified by what he saw and quickly looked at Gu Shijiu to see if she was all right. His face turned green the moment he saw her. Intuitively, he rushed over to his wife. Shijiu. Meanwhile, Gu Shijiu was still in shock. The water prison appeared to still be the same from the inside. However, when Gu Shijiu was in Di Fui's arms, and there seemed to be no black water on her. This was because Di Fui's wizardry barrier was also able to protect her. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Note: please download the sponsor's game to support us. Chapter 3023, Meeting 2. How did you come in? Why did you come in? Did you know that you can't get out after entering? We may be trapped here forever. Oh, yeah, how did you recognize that the person outside was not me? How did you know that I was locked inside here? When I saw you carrying Di Hao and walking away with her, I thought that you would never come back. Where is the demon? Gu Shijiu had a lot of questions in her heart and just blurted them all out in one go. You're so ugly. Di Fui did not answer her questions but sighed instead. Gu Shijiu was stunned. Ah. You look really ugly. Di Fui was already treating her even while she was talking. Gu Shijiu was even more stunned that she did not notice it sooner. She knew that she would not be as pretty as before. However, she did not expect Di Fui to comment on her appearance that way. Although she was still in her soul form, her soul managed to cultivate a physical body. Unfortunately, her skin was burned all over her body and even her face. Most of her hair was burnt off while the rest seemed to be eerily still attached to her scalp. In fact, she had always subconsciously protected her face. Whenever the water level rose and submerged her, she would try to cover her face to protect it so as to minimize any damage. Initially, her only plan was to escape from the place as fast as she could. She did not even think of her appearance for one moment until Di Fui pointed it out. But right after he did, she wanted to take a look at herself in the mirror. When Di Fui realized what she was about to do, he unexpectedly covered her eyes. Don't look. Gu Shijiu was speechless. If anything, he should be the one who should not look at her, right? Gu Shijiu had once heard a story of a concubine that did not want her emperor to see her when she was ill, as she was afraid that the emperor would see her in an ugly state. In the end, she died without the emperor getting to see her again, as she wanted the emperor only to remember her when she was beautiful. Using this logic, Gu Shizhou should not let Di Fui see her at all given the condition that she was in. Otherwise, he might develop a phobia toward her and abandon her. But you feel disgusted. How ugly was she now? Despite the crazy situation that they found themselves in, Gu Shizhou now contemplated if she would get a chance to wash away his memory sometime in the future so that he would never recall her image at this time. Since you know I feel disgusted, you have to recover as quickly as possible. Come on, do exactly what I say. Di Fui quickly began to instruct her on how to treat her burns. However, Gu Shizhou thought that this was not the most important thing to do right now. The black water here was able to erode any wizardry barrier and eventually absorb their spiritual power, so getting out of here should be their main objective. Although the wizardry barrier that Di Fui had set up was currently stable, it would not be able to last for long. It would be consumed by the black water sooner or later and break down. If that were to happen, all their efforts to treat Gu Zijia's burns would be wasted. She took a deep breath and discussed with him, "You, forget about my injuries, let's try to break out of here first. I am afraid that Hao Er is still in danger and is waiting for us to save. I have a spell that I am thinking about in my mind, and I think it's a solution, but I can only remember half of it. The other half is still missing. Let me tell you what I can remember and see if you know the rest." "No, I will treat you first. This cannot be delayed." Gu Shizhou was a little anxious by his reply. "Even if I recover, it's useless if I have to fall into the black water again later." Di Fui quietly listened to her, but he did not stop his fingers from continuing to treat her injuries. After she finished speaking, he continued, "Rest assured, I will not let you fall into the hot water again. Heal yourself first." "But, Hao Er, Shizhou, in my heart, you are my first priority." Di Fui interrupted her. Chapter 30-24, Meeting 3. Gu Shizhou did not answer, and Di Fui realized that he had been quite harsh to her ever since their reunion. In the end, he sighed and lowered his voice as he continued, "All right, Shizhou, I am sure that Hao Er is doing just fine. You should be worried about yourself right now. Your injuries cannot be left untreated any longer. Please, do as I say." At this time, Gu Shizhou was feeling more relieved by his reassurance. She listened to his instructions and started channeling her spiritual power as instructed. Di Fui assisted her whenever he could and estimated that it would take an hour for the wounds to develop connective tissues and turn into scars. While the treatment proceeded, Di Fui also managed to answer all of her questions. "I had to use the soul extracting spell to be here. I did not know anything that was going on here, but I had to come. Don't worry. There is nothing that can stop me from going out. If there are any hindrances, it only means that I need to put in a little more effort. We have been married for so long. There is nothing about you that I do not know. Other than her physical body, which I believe belongs to you, the two of you have nothing in common at all." I realized that something was off as soon as she put herself into my arms. Nevertheless, I took some time to entertain her because I was not sure if your soul was also trapped in the body. A few touches were enough for me to tell that your soul was not there. It was easy for me to tell that you were trapped here because the woman had thought that I was fooled, so she lost all her bearings in a moment of pride. She kept throwing glances at this rock as if showing off to someone. I would not dare to address myself as your husband if I failed to see that you are here. Yes, I went away with Hao Er because I realized that her strength was evil and powerful. I would be defeated if we were to get into a head-on battle. Fortunately, I found an excuse to get away from her to do some preparations before I led her into a trap. I needed to buy more time so that I could come back to you. Also, the person that you saw was not Hao Er." He answered everything, succinctly. Gu Shizhou felt that all her concerns were responded to at once. Gu Shizhou could still talk while she was carrying out her treatment, so she replied, "I somehow knew that Hao Er was fake, but I was not able to prove it before I was imprisoned." The dark water continued to rise while they talked, but Di Fui's wizardry barrier was strong enough to resist the pressure. Therefore, the rising water only managed to cover up the wizardry barrier and did not penetrate it. Gu Shijiu was unduly frightened, especially when she found out that the majority of her skin was severely burned. She thought that she would never be able to recover. But as always, Di Fui's presence shone a light of hope on her. He looked a little sad, but he remained composed the entire time. He would still joke around with her as though everything was going to be all right. Of course, she found it very reassuring. Of all the people in the world, Gu Shijiu was the one who knew him best. He always had a solution to every problem. They had been through many hardships together and overcame all of them with ease thanks to his quick wits. She was sure that it would be the same this time. Joyfully, she hugged Di Fui's waist and said, "I know you will always find a way." As for Gu Zijia's injuries, burns were the hardest to endure, especially the ones that she had just suffered. Di Fui knew how it must have felt as he got a taste of it when he first arrived. It was a pain that not even the toughest man could easily withstand. Di Fui took a look at the woman in his arms before he rubbed her head most affectionately. "It is okay to scream if you are still in pain. Don't hold it in. No one else can hear you. I am feeling much better now." Gu Shijiu dismissed his concern. Di Fui continued to look at her. "When I was examining your pulse, I noticed that you tried to use the soul dissipating spell. Did you try to kill yourself? I thought that I was never going to leave this place. Hence, I would rather die than be trapped here for all eternity," Gu Shijiu answered in a firm tone. Chapter 30-25, Meeting, 4. Di Fui took another glance at the surrounding black water and seemed to have a thought. "There must be something in the water that is affecting your state of mind. You are not the kind of person who gives up so easily." Gu Shijiu was hit by a sudden realization too. When did she become so weak and vulnerable? It was not the end of the world. Even if it was and everything came crashing down, she would normally be out there challenging the impossible. Suicidal thoughts would never be her option. It was then that she realized that the murky water corroded not only her skin but also diminished her willpower. Di Fui continued to have a conversation with her while treating her wounds. During their exchange, Gu Shijiu told him everything that happened here before he came. Obviously, the background of the woman in white came as an unpleasant surprise to Di Fui. "That explains it. When I looked into the depths of her soul trying to find out who she was, I realized that she was just like you. I was utterly shocked, thinking that your soul had been swollen whole, which resulted in her looking exactly like you too. I did not realize that she was a demon that used to be part of the deepest obsession in your past life." Gu Shijiu was only a few hundred years old, which put her at a significantly more tender age compared to Di Fui, whose lifespan was stretched over tens of thousands of years in total. Many things that she could not solve were no problems for Di Fui at all. It seemed Di Fui knew a lot more than her about demons. In fact, Gu Shijiu still wondered where she harvested all of her power. Also, it was rather strange that the demon truly had many of her characteristics, but perhaps they were skewed toward being more stubborn and ruthless. Gu Shijiu had doubts about the demon's intention, and whether or not the images that she saw about her previous life were real. Needless to say, she found it unbelievable that Fan Qianshi was actually her disciple in her previous life. She had no good feelings about this so-called disciple of hers. His hypocrisy and deceit were extremely bizarre. Di Fui explained, "If I am not mistaken, those images that you saw were real. However, your understanding of the demon is not entirely correct. A demon is not a reincarnation of your soul, but an obsession that is rooted in you. You must have lacked some sort of fulfillment in your previous life, which prompted the demon to grow and become independent. Oddly, it should only exist in your mind rather than have its own concrete existence. The most that it can do is to stick to the physical body it originated in and control the person's mind to commit something illogical. But this woman has become an independent individual, which is really odd. Do you think the situation is different because the demon belonged to the creation deity?" "A thought will still be a thought, regardless of whose mind it belonged to," Di Fui answered. A sudden realization dawned on Gu Shijiu. I once heard that your father used to have a demon who impersonated him as an independent individual, Gu Shijiu added. I heard about that from my father too. Even though his demon is an independent individual, it still adheres to him. Their characters are almost the same, but the demon is a little bit more stubborn. Also, the demon cannot stay too far away from him. He literally lives in the same mountain as my father, and they will meet once every 6 months. He has an unshakable loyalty to my father and has never gone against his will. This demon of yours, quite the contrary, wants you dead. I also find it rather odd that she has been able to exist for so long. Could someone have been helping her this whole time? Gu Shijiu was suddenly inspired. Di Fui agreed, probably. It must be someone with a compelling background and a broad knowledge in all sorts of wayward doctrines. Chapter 30-26, Could it be Fan Qianshi? Could it be Fan Qianshi? Based on their interactions in the desert earlier, it seemed that he was also helplessly trapped. In fact, he did not even seem to be able to put up a fight against the demon. Di Fui thought about it for a moment and gave his opinion. As you said, the demon has been trapped here, undisturbed and unmoved for tens of thousands of years. It only emerged as a problem about 20,000 years ago, which indicates that someone must have dropped by and disrupted the balance in the desert, turning it into a tool for the demon to consume lives and grow its power. There are 2 possible reasons why the demon has become independent. First of all, she inherited some memories and capabilities from the creation deity. Secondly, she has taken away many lives of powerful people whose souls were patched and needed to sustain her existence. Gu Shijiu murmured, her existence is a mixture of so many lives. No wonder she knows so much. I thought that her knowledge came from the conversations she had with the people who died here. Little did I know it was from their souls that she had consumed. Are you having doubts about yourself? Di Fui gently caressed her hair as he asked. Gu Shijiu did not doubt her own capability. She always knew that she was not perfect, to begin with anyway. Then, Di Fui planted a soft kiss on her forehead. You don't need to doubt yourself. I love the way you are, being perfectly imperfect. Feeling a little lost, Gu Shijiu was not sure if it was meant to be a compliment or an insult. She gave him a light kick and added, You are not perfect either. Your cooking is terrible. We are 2 of a kind, so we should stop belittling each other. He then kissed the tip of her nose and continued, Are you still in great pain? Gu Shijiu said nothing at first. She paused for a moment and suddenly realized why he had been blabbering on and on. He was trying to divert her attention away from her physical pain. Indeed, she was feeling much better now. The pain was bearable. Di Fui then studied her complexion and said, The pain should have subsided. Some colors have finally returned to your cheeks, he complimented, before giving her a soft kiss on the lips. The man had kissed her 3 times in quick succession. For that, Gu Shijiu was feeling blessed. Nonetheless, she pushed him away out of the blue. Di Fui was rather perplexed by her action as she was leaning in for another kiss when she suddenly pushed him away. What is the matter? Gu Shijiu did not answer his bewilderment. Instead, she retrieved a mirror. One quick look at her reflection almost prompted her to toss it away. She looked at Di Fui in disbelief. I look horribly repulsive, and yet you still managed to kiss me. Her wounds were beginning to form scars, but they had not entirely recovered. Her skin was covered entirely in patches of scabs and scars, and half of her hair was gone, making her look terribly unkempt. On top of that, there were 3 big scars on her face, which made her feel rather embarrassed. He still kissed her, regardless. Di Fui stroked her face gently. Don't feel bad. This look of yours is quite unique. Wait for me to retrieve your body. You will be able to have a good, long rest then. I am sure that all of your wounds will recover just fine. Gu Shijiu felt a sudden sense of hopelessness at the task he had. It would not be easy for him to retrieve her body. The demon was way too powerful. They would not be able to defeat her if they worked together. To make matters worse, both of them were still trapped. She looked at Di Fui and was reminded of a question that was left unanswered. This place is hard to get out of, so it must be difficult to get in as well. How did you manage to come here? By the way, if your soul is here, where is your body? Di Fui grasped her hand before he answered, this place is the same as the desert, which permits only entry. I did not face any difficulty coming in. As for my body, it is safe on the outside of the desert. Nothing is going to happen to it. Chapter 30:27, The man behind it all. Gu Shijiu grabbed his hand tightly as another realization struck. Your soul is here as a whole. You did not even leave one small fragment behind to guard your body. She felt an abrupt surge of anxiety in her body. Deities were free to leave their bodies behind and travel using their souls. However, a small fragment of their soul must be left behind to ensure the survival of their physical bodies, or they would be as good as dead. Any delays would cause the body to disintegrate while all systems fail and die away. Although Di Fui was a powerful man, his body was still a physical matter that would decay when without a soul to sustain its survival. All he had was a day to return to his body. Unfortunately, the heat would certainly accelerate the rate of decay. Panicked, Gu Shijiu expressed her utter disapproval at his actions. You have always been a careful man. Why did you make such blunder this time? She paused to take a deep breath before continuing, we have to get out as soon as we can. She knocked on the wizardry barrier and said, you should start working on a way out. I will look for other clues. However, Di Fui stopped her. You are still injured. Stay and rest. I will do the work, he instructed. Without further ado, he dived into the dark water and seemed to exit the wizardry barrier. Certainly, Gu Shijiu could not stay calm about the fact that he was diving deeper into the dark water. It was also when she saw another layer of wizardry barrier around him that she could ease her mind. About 2 hours later, Di Fui finally returned. Gu Shijiu examined his body to make sure he was unharmed. His skin was a little reddened, but he generally looked fine. She was relieved. Did you manage to find anything? The paleness of Di Fui's face indicated something was wrong. He reached out to Gu Shijiu and pulled her into a tight embrace. Shijiu, I am sorry, he said with guilt. I am afraid that we cannot make it out. The dark water cell is built with a foundation of countless resentful spirits. Unless we can purify their grudge all at once, we will never make it out. Gu Shijiu was speechless. When I first arrived, the desert was already swallowing the cities nearby. Many lives were taken away, all filled with resentment. I believe the calamity is still ongoing. This means that the strength of this prison will only grow stronger over time. It will be very difficult to purify. Di Fui closed his eyes and hugged her tightly. Shijiu, I am so sorry to let you down. Gu Shijiu remained quiet. She was not ready to give up and scanned her mind for any possible solutions. An abrupt thought reminded her of a series of spells that could be useful. In searching for a solution, she managed to find a way to create a strong wizardry barrier, but even then, it would only prolong their survival a little longer, so she did not bother to create it. They leaned against each other within the wizardry barrier that Di Fui first created. The barrier was already losing its rigidity and might collapse at any moment. In the very end, Gu Shijiu finally gave up. She buried herself in Di Fui's arms as she watched the black water grow deeper and darker. Fui, I am sorry for bringing you into this trouble. Who do you think is the person behind it all? It will be my regret if I do not find out. Fan Qianshi, Di Fui calmly said. How do you know? Firstly, only Fan Qianshi knows the soul-kneading spell. Secondly, building the dark water prison using resentful spirits is a special skill that not many people know about. From my research, Fan Qianshi used to have a close link to one of the people who knew this technique many years ago. He must have taught Fan Qianshi the method, which he then passed on to the demon. Thirdly, and most importantly, Fan Qianshi wants me dead for good or at least to trap me for life. Now, his goal is achieved. Ha! It seems you are the real Di Fui. What a smart man. You are smart enough to have guessed it all, but it is too late. A sudden voice emerged. Fan Qianxue then made a graceful appearance on the outside of the water prison. Chapter 30:28. Do you confess to everything that I have just said? He was covered in a loose black robe and seemed to be carrying an aura of doom and gloom. Silver embroideries were delicately sewn on the fabric that displayed scenic landscapes. His robe danced in the air as he gracefully made his landing. His hair was tied and fastened by a jade hairpin. In contrast to his pale face and white hairpin, his entire body was covered entirely in black. The man was a masterpiece in his own right, with extraordinarily refined elegance. His facial features gave him the appearance of a fine young gentleman, but his aura, as an overpowering ruler, was not to be underestimated. It was the first time Gu Shijiu saw his true face, but he somehow reminded her of someone she had seen before. She paused to think and realized it was indeed him. She saw him from her dreams. In her dreams, she saw Di Fui playing chess against Fan Qianxue. He was wearing the same black outfit as the first time she saw him. He must be here to show off his supreme identity as a creation deity. He looked clean and neat, with his hair perfectly done. No detail on his outfit was overlooked, and he certainly looked different from when Gu Shijiu saw him a few days ago. Perhaps he was only pretending to look messy back then. His acting skills were undoubtedly convincing. It was a shame that he did not make acting his full-time career. Fan Qianxue could obviously see them through the prison. His eyes lingered on them both, first on Gu Shijiu, and then to Di Fui. Mr. Fui, what else do you have to say? Do you confess to everything that I have just said? Di Fui asked after a momentary pause. Fan Qianxue swiftly agreed, of course. That's a surprise. I thought you were going to quibble for a bit and act all innocent. That is totally unnecessary, Fan Qianxue proudly said. He had been planning this for thousands of years and had been through slanders and humiliations to carry out his mission. It was a success at last. Di Fui was trapped with no way out. He needed to savor the moment by making the most fun out of the situation. The man that he had been waiting to defeat and his moment of victory were finally in his grasp. He wanted for Di Fui to be sad and depressed as a compensation for the many tough years that he had to wield his power from the shadows. At this point, there was no need for him to deny any further accusations. Instead, he was ready to tell them more. How many years have you been planning this? Di Fui asked. 56, 328 years. To be more accurate, I will even add 5 months and 8 days, Fan Qianxue made it very clear. What a long time. Di Fui was quite surprised by his determination. You have only come to know the demon for about 30,000 years, which means that you had spent the first 20,000 years looking for the perfect subject, am I right? Fan Qianxue answered, that is right. A perfect subject is hard to come by. It takes a favorable climate and geographical position to brew a perfect plan. After a pause, he then added, however, you made a mistake just now. I did not learn the method of building the dark water prison from Luo Jiuqian. Instead, he got it from me. He was the one who spread the news. Di Fui continued, were you the one who planned for Luo Jiuqian's bizarre disaster that endangered the 6 worlds? I was not even alive back then. What did you aim to achieve? To test the effectiveness of a newly found spell. Gu Shijiu was dumbfounded. She looked at Fan Qianxue in utter disbelief and started to question if he was indeed a demon himself. He put innocent people at risk by plunging them into an abyss of misery and death, all because he needed to test a spell. Fan Qianxue caught her looking at him with eyes that were filled with disgust and utter disapproval. He then looked away. Chapter 30:29, you only planned to bring me down. He opened up his foldable fan in a casual manner before continuing, don't you look at me like that. They were great troubles to me back then. I needed to teach them a lesson. When did you find Zygius demon? 35,000 years ago, Fan Qianxue answered honestly. I came across this place by accident and saw the little desert in a small town. It seemed like uncharted territory that needed to be explored. I decided to go in there out of curiosity and found the demon that was hidden within. She did not even have a body or a face of her own. Also, she was disgusted by the sight of me. He threw Gu Shizhou a quick glance and added, she reminded me of you, looking innocent and harmless, but harmful in the end. Also, she did not remember me at all. Gu Shizhou disapproved of his statement. I have only one regret. With her eyes fixed on Fan Qianshi, she then firmly said, I must have been blind to have you as my disciple. Fan Qianshi's face turned pale at her disappointment. It is my destiny to become a creation deity. Having me as your disciple in only the course of our crossed destinies, he smirked in triumph. It is my greatest mistake to have feelings for you. I remained loyal to you and asked only for you to pay more attention to me. But what did you do to me instead? You planned to bring me down. Furthermore, you forgot your mission completely, all in the name of love. You acted against destiny's calling and trained Di Fui as your successor instead, so he could go on and become the ultimate ruler of all 6 worlds. You put me away in isolation, so I would not be in his way. It was my mistake to think that you actually cared for me, even though you did not love me. I thought you had everything planned for me until the dawn of your immortalization. I was thrilled for days when you got me a candle dragon's egg. Wholeheartedly, I nurtured the egg to hatch it so that you could finally be proud of my achievement. I worked tirelessly for your approval, but what did you do to me instead? Gu Shizhou went into a rage. What did I do? The egg was only an excuse to keep me out of your way. You were on the brink of your immortalization, so you needed time to bring Di Fui up as the next creation deity. You brought him into the forbidden land of God and passed everything down to him so that I would end up becoming the laughingstock of the 6 worlds. However, it was a shame that destiny disposed of the plan that you proposed. I could sense that you were dying, so I made my way to you and entered the forbidden land of God by chance. All of a sudden, I awoke to become the next creation deity, with powers given by God. I was blind to have fallen for you, such a simple-minded and heartless woman. Gu Shizhou said nothing more. Chapter 30:30, playing off one against the other as destiny unfolded, Fan Qianshi eventually became the creation deity. Di Fui, who had been quiet for a while, commented, you were not blinded by love, but instead, by your obsession. You wanted things that were not meant to be yours. Anyway, those are long in our past, so there is no point to even talk about it now. It seems like the demon is only a tool of yours. How did you know that Shizhou would end up here? If it was not for Di Hao, we would not have stepped foot into this desert at all. Fan Qianshi explained in an arrogant manner, Di Hao was only an accident. The demon had reached full maturity, so it was only a matter of time before she became fully destructive. Even without Di Hao, you would still come to evaluate the situation. Once you entered the desert, you would have no choice but to play along according to my rules. Di Fui laughed out loud at his ludicrousness. Fan Qianshi, you got us. We acknowledge that. What about the demon? What are you going to do with her? That is none of your concern, Fan Qianshi dismissed him swiftly. Meanwhile, Di Fui continued with heavy irony, you are afraid to tell us, aren't you? Your goal has been achieved, so she will be eliminated as well. In order for you to truly become the ruler of all 6 worlds, you need to build a lasting reputation by gaining public respect. The expansion of the demonic desert will go on indefinitely and become the biggest catastrophe that endangers the existing world. If you get rid of it, people will submit themselves to you for all eternity. Gu Shizhou finally got a grasp of it. To kill 2 birds with 1 stone. What an impressive strategy. Shut up. I will not do anything harmful to her. Fan Qianshi responded with anger. With a smirk, Di Fui continued to challenge him, is that so? Fan Qianshi, others may know nothing about the soul-kneading spell, but you cannot fool me. It is dark magic that will cause her to have a hidden but fatal defect, which, I believe, is a fact that you concealed from her. You, as the originator of the spell, know about its fatality better than anyone else. If you want to kill her, all you have to do it is to attack the defective spot of hers. Also, This dark water prison is a cruel practice that absorbs countless of resentful spirits, which is something against the laws of nature. With the use of such a spell, her kung fu will be largely increased, but at the risk of her own safety. At some point, she will not be able to hold against the overbearing grudges and collapse. She will die in a major explosion, even without any intervention from you. Luo Jiuqin used the same spell on a celestial being and turned her into a massive killing machine. She ended up being swallowed by the resentful spirits, without a trace of her soul left behind. Gu Shijiu looked surprised. Are you talking about the feud between the Divine Lord and the Great Devil? I have heard about it. Luo Jiuqin wanted to replace the Divine Lord, but he could not do the killing on his own. Secretly, he used the Divine Lord's god-sister as his subject and turned her into a weapon that threatened all beings. She thought that she was invincible, but little did she know that she was merely a pawn in another's grand scheme of wickedness. With a frown, Fan Qianshi wanted to defend himself, but Di Fui added on, Fan Qianshi, are you trying to deny it? Are you going to say that the incident was made up? Are you going to deny the fact that you were the one who taught Luo Jiuqin dark magic? If you were bold enough to do it back then, you should man up and accept the responsibility right now. Fan Qianshi replied scornfully, so what if it is true? To answer your question, yes, I was the one who taught him dark magic. Chapter 30-31, Playing off one against the other, 2. Before he was done explaining, a sudden rush of cold wind interrupted him. Fan Qianshi, I did not know about that part of your plan, an icy voice could be heard echoing in the air. A lady in a green dress arrived at the scene. The demon made her way here in time to hear the story. She was still carrying Gu Zijia's body, but her aura was completely different. Nonetheless, her face remained the same. A layer of dark energy surrounded her body while the resentful spirits terrifyingly continued their ghastly howls. Surprisingly, she seemed aware of their conversation, as observed from her boiling rage. She looked at Fan Qianshi fixedly with a sense of hostility. Bastard! How dare you challenge me? Fan Qianshi was dumbstruck. Things had taken a very sharp turn for him. He already set up a secured perimeter with a layer of wizardry barrier that was soundproof. Their conversations were only meant for their ears. How did the demon find out about it? Master, don't you listen to them. They are trying to drive a wedge between us, Fan Qianshi quickly explained. The demon refused to listen to him any further. With a smug, she rushed toward him at an astonishing speed. Are you trying to deny it? I have heard everything. Fan Qianshi, I would love to see how you plan to rebel against your own master. Fan Qianshi did not know what to tell her to ease the situation. He wanted to give her an excuse or some sort of reason, but the demon refused to listen to him any longer. She overheard their conversation from the corner and thought that it was enough information for her to confirm Fan Qianshi's revolting behavior. She offered no second chance to him. A deadly fight was inevitable. At this point, the demon's spiritual power was at its highest. As soon as she struck her first move, the sky was immediately obscured with layers of dark clouds. In a mist of black fog, the sand particles had turned into sharp weapons. As if braving a raging storm, it would surely be a very tough fight for Fan Qianshi. Unfortunately for him, there was no time for him to explain any further. He had to focus and fight for his life. Both of them started engaging each other with powerful moves that made the sky feel as though it was falling apart. The raging wind that entered the fray made the surrounding air filled with sand and dust. The boulders and rocks in the desert seemed to be shattered as a result of their battle. The only boulder that remained was the one that housed Di Fui and Gu Shijiu. It stood against the raging storm and remained unaffected. Gu Shijiu watched as the fight went on for a while and sighed. She started directing a directed audio message to Di Fui, their moves are more or less the same. The demon obviously possesses her memory from her previous life. They really do seem like a master and a disciple. A master and a disciple in their previous lives, Di Fui corrected. Do you think I mistreated him before? Would I bring him down all because of you? Di Fui rubbed her hair gently and said, who knows what happened previously? It is our past anyway, he then sighed before continuing, I have no memory about that, too. However, I am pleased that you and I were already madly in love, even in our previous lives. The fight was still ongoing in a state of chaos and darkness, and victory still hung in the balance. Nevertheless, all Gu Shizhou could think about now was Di Hao. I wonder how Hao is doing at the moment. Has he fallen into the cruel hands of Fan Qianshi? Di Fui reassured, worry not. Hao is still well and alive. Really? How do you know? Gu Shizhou was surprised by his tone of confidence. A telepathic connection between a father and a son. He hid the truth from her that Di Hao was the master of the heavenly law. If anything happened to him, there would be odd happenings everywhere to indicate his death. Also, Di Fui would be able to sense it. In this case, no news means good news. The boy was still alive and well. The only question was where he was hiding. Gu Shizhou knew that Di Fui would not joke with her about the safety of their child, so she finally felt slightly relieved. Chapter 30-32, Playing off one against the other. 3. She took a look at the demon again, and then to Di Fui. I thought you kept her away, somewhere hidden, didn't you? I did not expect that she would come back so early. Also, Fan Qianshi should know that this place is still the demon's territory, and yet he blabbered on without a care. Every bit about the truth was generously spilled. There must be a wizardry barrier that he thought was soundproof. If that is so, how did the demon find out everything? By the way, how did you manage to escape? She threw out a series of questions at him. Di Fui had no intention of lying to her. An array formation was set up about 100 miles from here. When we got there, I made an excuse that I had to treat Haoer's injuries. She felt very safe in her territory, so she stopped by without any concern. Then, I made up another excuse to run a perimeter check. That was when I left. I made a replacement puppet to go back to her as a reassurance. She acted like she was severely injured, so she sat in silent cultivation for recovery. She did not even check on the replacement that I made, so I seized the window of opportunity and found my way back to you. However, the replacement could only last for 2 hours. When the time was up, she would surely notice something was off and would go looking for me. The array formation was made to confine her for only 2 hours. Also, I left a mirror behind on purpose. The parallel mirror? Yes, from the mirror, she would be able to see and hear everything that was happening here. Gu Shizhou was thoroughly impressed by his quick wits. What a thoughtful plan. Did you figure out that the demon and Fan Qianshi were actually on the same team a long time ago? Di Fui nodded. I did not know about the demon's identity at first, but I somehow found that the swallowing desert looked familiar. It seemed like something only Fan Qianshi would do, so I tried to lure him into talking. It went well as he spilled everything. Gu Shizhou was awestruck. You made it sound so real, but it turned out to be a trap. I had made my deductions from the available facts. My logical conclusions hardly go wrong. Did you also deduce that the demon would end up in shambles? More or less. So full of tricks. With a thumbs up, Gu Shizhou was very impressed by her husband's daring maneuvers. Di Fui held her thumb in his hand and said, I think you can say that I am both intelligent and practical. Also, baby, I have to say that you are brilliant. I did not tell you anything in advance, and yet you were able to chime in. Gu Shizhou was quite embarrassed by his compliment. Well, I would not be compatible with the great celestial master Zhua if I were any less intelligent, right? They continued to chat on for a while before Gu Shizhou turned her attention back to the fight. Fan Qianshi and the demon continued battling against one another in the sky. Gu Shizhou looked up but could only see the rolling dark clouds. Lightning flashed, and thunder rumbled every once in a while. Occasionally, their figures could be seen against the light. Gu Shizhou softly said, They are so busy fighting. Shouldn't they be worried about our escape? Di Fui examined the dark water that surrounded them and replied, This dark water prison is truly the best way to secure anyone from running away. They are not worried about us at all. don't you have a way out? Gu Shijiu was really curious. With a smile, Di Fui answered confidently, don't worry. There is nothing in the world that can trap me. Gu Shijiu heaved a sigh of relief. He sounded like he already had a plan. Let's take the chance to run away now when they are not paying attention. She refused to waste any time. Chapter 30-33, Playing off one against the other. 4. It is not the right time yet. Let's wait, Di Fui suggested while observing the clouds of dust around them. Gu Shijiu was perplexed. Di Fui sighed before explaining, one of them is the creation deity, the other is the demon of the former creation deity. The fight is causing the place to undergo earth-shattering changes, which probably involves the entire desert. Nowhere else is safe. Look at the clouds of dust. Their fight will affect anyone with 1,000 miles. Without the power of a great deity, one will perish as soon as he or she enters the radius of their battlefield. Clearly, he had a point. Gu Shijiu agreed with him. We are not capable of defeating them. You are injured, and I am exhausted. Running away right now will make us both easy targets. This does not sound like a good plan at all. Shall we wait until both of them have worn each other out? Smart, Di Fui complimented, while gently caressing her hand. Gu Shijiu threw him a quick look. She was actually quite impressed by her husband's modest estimate of his power. He frankly admitted his weakness when he was not at his best. Sometimes, he would go the extra mile to achieve his goal, even though the path he takes may be seen as somewhat wayward. Perhaps his kung fu was not what made him invincible but his insightful ideas. Baby, why are you looking at me with judgment in your eyes? You are mistaken. I am idolizing you with a sense of admiration. They continued to chat for a while as Gu Shijiu was more relieved. Knowing that her son was safe and that they would eventually be safe, too, made their chat more relaxed. With a sigh of relief, she said, they would not stand a chance if you recall your memory and kung fu as the master of the heavenly law. Also, we would not have to waste our time here waiting for our chance of escape. Di Fui started thinking about what she said but soon broke into a smile. Don't worry. I will teach them a lesson even without the power of a deity. A well-thought plan is better than a moment of bravery. We should anticipate and outsmart the competition. In time, we shall defeat them all. Gu Shijiu stayed quiet, but her respect had been won over by Di Fui. You are always full of wisdom. Meanwhile, the terrifying sight of the dark water sent chills down her spine. The level of water in the prison continued to rise. The couple then looked around, only to realize that the surface of the water was already about the size of Taihu Lake. The vast blackness was a rather grim sight. Just at that time, the rise in the water level came to a halt. Gu Shijiu told Di Fui about her keen observation of the water level. Seems like they made it, Di Fui commented. Ah. We have a lot of people here to support us. I told them about an array formation that they needed to set up here. With enough manpower and energy, the array formation can be used to suppress the expansion of the desert. It looks like they made it here in time. A large crowd was gathered on the outskirts of the desert. Amongst them were Kun Shui, the four messengers, the celestial emperor, the devil king, and all 8 ancient mythical beasts. Almost every important person from all 6 worlds was present to support. They were equally aghast at the extreme oddity of the desert. However, there was no time for fear. As soon as they arrived, they followed Baize's instruction and started learning the key features of the array formation. The formation was a very complex one, but they were able to learn everything fairly quickly. About 2 hours later, the entire array formation was aligned in the sky. Many streaks of light filled the sky, brightening up the entire gloomy desert. The array formation was a crucial weapon in this tactical situation. The results could be seen immediately as the crazy expansion of the desert finally came to a halt. Baize finally heaved a sigh of relief. Unfortunately, the entire territory here was already engulfed by the desert. Millions of lives were lost. Chapter 30-34, the grand finale from afar, the desert was filled entirely with black dust. The screaming spirits screeched in the wind, and their piercing voices grew louder and more disturbing. These spirits were extremely violent, almost to an unimaginable extent. The crowd outside could feel the forces of evil even from miles apart. None of them had experienced such a violent desert before. The mere sight of the evil spirits made their skin creep but also made them appreciate De Fui's prophetic vision. The desert was like a giant black hole. They needed to stop it from consuming everything in its path, or the entire world would cease to exist. They were glad that De Fui had foreseen the consequences in advance, so they had time to prepare the array formation. One thing was for sure, they did not have to stand there in despair just yet. At least 500 people showed up to support. All of them were powerful. Although they were able to expand the array formation to its fullest, it was certainly very challenging to keep it going. The evil aura of the desert was too strong to be held within. It felt like holding back a giant dinosaur with only a rope. Even with their maximum strength and effort, all they could do was to stop the desert from expanding further. Nevertheless, they did not stand a chance to defeat it. In order to permanently remove the roots of the problem and prevent a reoccurrence, they had to start from within. However, the desert was too violent at the moment. They would be shredded into pieces if they moved any closer. Going into the desert seemed impossible right now. Therefore, they continued to support the array formation. As they did so, they also kept observing the ongoing situation. De Fui had gone into the desert for many hours by then, but there was still no news from him. Bai Zhe started wondering if he and Madame were safe in there. The array formation would only last for 2 days at most. Would it buy them enough time and power to destroy the desert? Bai Zhe took a look at the desert where black dust continued to storm and was quite puzzled. It was said that the array formation was able to put the expansion of the disastrous desert to a halt, and hopefully, make it shrink. The apparent situation turned out to be completely different from their expectations. Bai Zhe then took a quick look at the familiar faces who took part in the array formation, which included Long Sai. Recently, Long Sai had an exceptional encounter with a great deity who ended up becoming his master. Her name was Hua Yan. Although she was not a well-known figure, her power was not to be underestimated. Furthermore, her method of teaching was proven to be effective, as seen from Long Sai's outstanding achievement as a great deity in only a few years. The Emperor Immortal gladly appointed him as the chief advisor as well as his right-hand man. Also, he was entrusted with the power of the military. As the commander-in-chief, he led a delegation of more than 100,000 soldiers. As for his mysterious master, she had been living under Long Sai's roof with a rather secluded life. Bai Zhe once investigated her background, but there was nothing suspicious or odd that he could find. She was just a hermit who was phlegmatic and antisocial. She used to live in a celestial mountain from a foreign land, which was where Long Sai met her. He was there to collect some herbs but got involved in an accident. Fortunately, the lady was there to help. The next thing she noticed was Long Sai's potential, which prompted her to take him as her disciple. It was said to be an act for him to return her favor of saving his life. It was a rather odd method of repaying one's debt, but Long Sai was not particularly bothered by it. Moreover, he refused to owe her any favors, so he agreed to become her disciple. To his surprise, she turned out to be a responsible master. She taught him many hidden spells and also gave away many magical pills and medicine to him. In time, Long Sai's kung fu became more and more powerful. Bai Zhe had been following her tracks for many years, but there seemed to be no concern at all. Although Long Sai's kung fu was elevated at an astonishing rate, everything about him was still good and pure, with no involvement of dark magic. With that said, Bai Zhe was finally able to let the matter go. At first, Bai Zhe did not plan to notify Long Sai and his master, Hua Yan, about this gathering of great powers. After all, Long Sai used to be a clone of Fan Qianshi. There might be some sort of telepathic connection that could be misused by Fan Qianshi to anticipate and control Long Sai's every move. Chapter 30-35, The Grand Finale, 2. It seemed that the Emperor Immortal absolutely trusted Long Sai. Baize thought that Emperor Immortal shared the same concern, so it did not send any formal reminder to him. Nonetheless, Long Sai ended up being brought to the gathering as well. Long Sai even brought his master, Hua Yan, along. Both of them were assigned to their designated locations. Like everyone else, they channeled all of their power to support the array formation. It was a relieving sight for Baize to see them working together with everyone. Naturally, it threw Hua Yan a quick glance every once in a while. Her name had a youthful and fresh tone associated with it, which was the complete opposite of her unapproachable character. No one dared to go near to her at all. Her beauty was, without a doubt, captivating. Many men had their hearts submitted to her but ended up with the same ruthless rejection. Baize thought that she and Gu Shijiu were quite similar in terms of their character, though their appearances were vastly different. Perhaps it was her personality that brought Long Sai close to her. Baize still had some doubts about them, so it asked the Flying Serpent and Tao Wu to stay close to them. If anything went wrong, they would be able to pacify the situation. Things went wild in the desert. The epic battle between Fan Qianshi and the demon had come to its climax. The sky and the earth had split, and Fan Qianshi started to regret his actions. Di Fui was right, however. Fan Qianshi had indeed planted a weak point in the demon. Unfortunately for her, it was under Fan Qianshi's control. He did not intend to end the demon in a major explosion. Instead, he was trying to decrease her power and strength to the level of an ordinary immortal. As he was still obsessed with Gu Shijiu, Fan Qianshi would definitely not give her up so easily. He could now own her body rather easily, but what he truly wanted was her heart. He had a plan mapped out. The demon would be the one who created the trap for Gu Shijiu and Di Fui. With Di Fui in his hands, he would decide whether to kill or to imprison the man. Later, everything about the man in Gu Zijia's memory would be wiped away. Granted with a new body, the demon's memory would then be planted into her head, and they would start from a clean slate and fall in love. Hopefully, the two would end up spending eternity together. Nevertheless, Fan Qianshi was also aware that it was almost impossible to control Gu Shijiu. Her memory could not be wiped clean as her love for Di Fui was irreversible. Therefore, he wanted to keep the demon as a potential backup. The demon and Gu Shijiu were not very similar, but they were somehow related. Also, the demon still had some memories of the former creation deity. When his revenge was complete, he would take control of the demon and disassemble her souls. The resentment and grudge would be removed, leaving the demon in her primitive form. He would then combine the demon with other souls that he had carefully selected so that she could become a whole new person but still carry the memory of the former creation deity. He wanted to create a future where they could spend together forever. Regardless of his available options, the death of the demon was not on the list. The plan was to confine Di Fui and Gu Shijiu in the desert first and then leave the desert to evolve into a deadly disaster for the 6 worlds. He would then emerge as a hero who took down the desert and put an end to its destruction. Fan Qianshi was the one who brought the desert to life, so he was the one who could stop it. He looked forward to becoming a hero who got rid of the disaster and would then take the chance to establish his power and take over the 6 worlds as the ultimate ruler. Unfortunately, Di Fui saw through his plot and exposed his tracks. To make matters worse, the demon overheard their entire conversation. Chapter 30-36, The Grand Finale, 3, Unfortunately, Di Fui saw through his plot and exposed his tracks. To make matters worse, the demon overheard their entire conversation. Their battle became unavoidable, even though it was something Fan Qianshi did not plan for. It was a pity that they had to fight, but he was not nervous about it. He had her life in his control, so it was not difficult to threaten her whenever necessary. Nevertheless, it was an ultimate move that he would like to avoid using unless necessary. He wanted to fight her with his powers first to try to tame the demon. However, as soon as the battle started, he finally realized that the demon's kung fu was much more powerful than he had expected. Her power was in no way inferior to his power as a creation deity. In fact, the more she fought, the better she got. He tried to escape many times but was unsuccessful. To his dismay, she pushed him into a flurry of attacks that made him make careless mistakes. At this point, the result of the battle was uncertain. While Fan Qianxue was busy fighting, he never stopped looking at the dark water prison. Di Fui was sitting there with Gu Shijiu in his arms. She looked dreadfully untidy, but at least she was happy. Casually, she laid her head on his chest so that Di Fui could stroke her hair. Di Fui saw Fan Qianqi's eyes lingering on them and returned it with a smile. Obviously, Fan Qianxue found the couple to be utterly annoying. They were busy showing affection to one another, even in times of great danger. Fan Qianxue could not help but smirk at their lack of awareness. He could tell what Di Fui thought since he was renowned for his ability to solve any sort of wizardry barrier. The man must be thinking that the dark water prison was just another challenge. Perhaps, they were actually waiting for the right time to escape when the fight finally came to a bitter end. However, he would not let Di Fui have what he wanted. The dark water in the prison was, indeed, extracted from the resentful spirits in the desert. In order to permanently confine Di Fui, the desert would have to swallow 6 million fresh souls that would keep the prison secure. He made a detailed calculation already and determined that once the desert had swallowed 36 major cities in the continent, the death toll would definitely rise to the desired amount. Also, he paid extra attention to the surface area of the dark water whenever he managed to steal a glance. When the dark water reached the size of 2 Taihu lakes combined, it would mean that 6 million lives had been consumed in total, and the wizardry barrier would be heavily fortified by then. The dark water prison was about the size of 1.5 Taihu lakes at the moment. It would not be long before it reached its maturity. 6 more hours were all it needed. Laugh on, Di Fui. Both of you will be terribly sorry, he thought. Fan Qianxue could not help but curse at them for their foolishness, but when he saw Gu Zijius burns, his heart ached a little for her. He tried to forget the pain that she had to suffer and put the blame on her. The man had originally intended to get Gu Shijiu out of the prison before the barrier was reinforced so that she would not have to suffer the corrosion from the dark water again. However, the way she chimed in with Di Fui in their brutal confrontation had driven a wide wedge between Fan Qianxue and the demon. He had to employ all of his energy in the fight, so there was no way he could get her out of the water. 2 hours went by, and Fan Qianxue took another quick look at the level of the dark water and was surprised. The surface area did not seem to grow at all. It was still as big as when he last saw it. How was that possible? Who else could have possibly stopped the deadly desert from expanding? While he was busy contemplating, a brief moment of absent-mindedness almost cost him his life. Fortunately for him, he was able to escape his fate of being beheaded. However, he was not able to escape the pain. The blade slashed his shoulder open and cut away part of his flesh. He winced, aghast at the brutality of the injury. Chapter 30-37, The Grand Finale, 4. Fan Qianxue took a few quick steps back to keep his balance, but the wound was unusually painful and numbing. He felt as if countless ants were chewing off his flesh all at the same time. It was terribly uncomfortable, and he caught some blood oozing out from the wound in one quick glance. To add to his misery, the blood was golden. He had been poisoned. It was an unfamiliar type of poison, unknown even to an expert like him. Naturally, he looked at the demon in bewilderment. The demon did not follow on from her successful attack with a series of blows. Instead, she stood watching him with a satisfied smile. Fan Qianxue, you once promised to be my disciple forever, but I have changed my mind about that. You are becoming my servant instead. The next thing that Fan Qianxue could feel was something crawling from the wound into his flesh. Through the bloodstream, he could feel the sensation slowly taking over his consciousness as his head started to spin. He never thought he would be poisoned. Fan Qianxue conducted frequent experiments with all sorts of poisons. In time, his body had developed a natural defense against most poisons, which led him to think that he was already immune. Luckily for him, he always had the antidote with him, which he downed hastily. The demon looked at him attentively as she commented, "It is useless. The poison has no cure. Be prepared to serve, my boy." "What kind of poison is this?" Fan Qianshi started panting. It is known as the Eternal Love Potion, the demon answered ironically. This poison was supplied by a gentleman. His kung fu was not spectacular, but his poison-making skill was extraordinary. I almost fell for his poisonous trap during our fight. Eventually, I swallowed his soul as a whole, so his skill became mine. Blood from the heart of 1,000 couples was extracted and purified into this fine bottle of elixir. This is the only bottle that I have made available for a single use. Glimpses of hope shone in his eyes as he said, "You made this elixir for us to be together eternally?" Actually, that is totally unnecessary. I want to be with you, always and forever. The demon laughed out loud at the absurdity of his reply. That is a complete misunderstanding. I was not asking for your love, but your eternal obedience. When the poison gets to your brain, you will completely submit to my authority. She only wanted him to become a puppet. Fan Qianshi sighed. You should not have done that. I have always been truthful to you about my feelings. I will do anything for you, even without the poison. What a lie. This whole scheme of yours will be used against me when everything comes to an end. I am only a tool in your elaborate plan. You have admitted it all, so stop denying. Master, I only said so to annoy them both. It was not the truth. Look at us. Look at my injury. We have been fighting for so long, but I have not done anything to you thus far, have I? If I knew about your weak point, I would have used it already. Master, you are a very smart woman. You should know that I have been wronged. He then reached out his hand to the demon and continued, Give me the antidote, please. The demon pinched her lips into a thin line in display of her regret. This is not the antidote. The gentleman tended to go to the extreme, so all of his poisons had no cure. Fan Qianshi was utterly shocked by her remark. His eyes became dim and he swayed a little as a result of the poison but did not seem to cast any spells. However, glimpses of colorful rays faintly flashed with every movement he made. The series of movements seemed unintentional, but he was actually activating the fatality point that was buried in the soul of the demon. He had tested the method on other subjects many times. It never failed. Chapter 30-38, The Grand Finale, 5. He wanted to wait until the dark water prison was successfully reinforced before he cast the spell on the demon, but his safety was at risk, so he could not delay it any longer. At that moment, he could feel the sensation moving aggressively in his bloodstream towards his head. If he had not set up a barrier in time to separate and protect his brain, the poison would have taken away everything. As expected, the poison was very aggressive, so the barrier that he had set up could barely hold on any longer. He needed to focus on meditating in order to keep the poison out of his system, or he would become a puppet forever. Needless to say, it needed to be done quickly. A few moments later, the demon suddenly felt an abnormality in her body that made her struggle to keep her balance. She took a few unsteady steps forward and seemed to be about to fall. With one hand on her chest, she looked at Fan Qianshi with bloodshot eyes. Bastard! What have you done to me? She exclaimed furiously. She could feel her chest being struck heavily with a blunt instrument in a deadly attempt to tear her apart. In fact, the pieces of her soul were struggling to stay in one piece. She noticed that it was Fan Qianshi who was behind what was happening. You must be playing some tricks with me. You just said that you knew nothing about my fatality point. Panicked, Fan Qianshi could not believe what had just happened. The spell had failed. He thought that the spell was able to separate the demon's soul from her body. Without a physical body, the demon's kung fu would be greatly reduced, thus reducing her will to fight. Like a tiger without its teeth, he could easily control her then. To his disappointment, the spell only caused her to sway a little, but her soul was still strongly attached to her body. To make matters worse, his plan was completely exposed. The demon flew into a rage, as evidenced by the fury in her eyes. She crossed her hands before taking a huge leap towards Fan Qianshi in an attempt to take revenge. Bastard, you truly are plotting against me. There was no time for Fan Qianxue to feel sorry for himself as another round of the battle was inevitable. He continued to use the spell a few times in order to attack her weakness, but all he could do was to make her lose her balance. There was no actual use at all. Instead of working in his favor, he managed to trigger her into a killing mania. She was ruthless, and there was no way she was backing down. She made a loud screech to summon the winds of winter. In an instant, the flat land of sand was turned entirely into a bizarre land of ice, while the surrounding temperature in the desert dropped sharply as if the world was undergoing another glacial episode. Snowflakes sluiced down the land like sharp knives and were all aimed at Fan Qianxue. Gu Shijiu and Di Fui were patiently sitting inside the prison. According to Di Fui's plan, they were supposed to wait until Fan Qianxue attacked the demon by triggering her weak point. When their enemies were both worn out, it would be their time to fight. However, they did not see the failure of the spell coming. It did not seem to have any noticeable effect on weakening the demon. Instead, it released her full potential. The rising level and temperature of the dark water already came to a stop before everything went haywire, so they could actually have some time to rest. However, as soon as the demon went all guns blazing, the dark water started boiling again. On the outside, they could see snow everywhere, but within their confinement, the dark water continued to boil, thus filling their limited space with hot vapor. Also, many scary skeletons that were flashing with red light seemed to appear in the prison. With their mouth wide open, they had their fangs buried on the surface of the wizardry barrier in an eager attempt to break through it and chew on the living beings that were sitting helplessly in the bubble. As the dark water continued to boil, more and more skeletons came alive. About an hour later, the entire bubble of their wizardry barrier was surrounded by countless skeletons from every direction and was a rather spooky sight. Chapter 30-39, The Grand Finale, 6, As naturally, Di Fui's wizardry barrier began to lose its stability. Frankly, he already felt that the wizardry barrier was losing its rigidity even before the demon became furious with Fan Qianxue. Suddenly, he announced, "No. Things are not looking good. We have to get out now." Without wasting any time, he started to work on their escape plan. Di Fui was well prepared, but he would still need at least an hour for them to find a way out. Luckily, he had a helpful assistant. Gu Shijiu was informed of the solution beforehand so she could play a part in their escape. Soon, they became fully occupied with their tasks. While they were still working on the barrier, Di Fui suddenly said, "Shijiu, we have to be quick. The water is rising again." The rising level of the dark water indicated that the desert was, once again, expanding. More lives were inevitably lost in this tragic disaster. They really had to be quick. On the outside of the desert, there had been an unforeseen calamity. The desert was contained for a while earlier, so the expansion stopped. Nevertheless, when they heard a loud screech from within the core of the desert, it went into an uncontrollable and frantic mode. Like a confined beast that had just broken free, it became 10 times more powerful than it was before. Ruthlessly, it started attacking people in different corners of the array formation. They tried their very best to keep it contained but ended up being swept away by the aggressive storm. Many could not withstand the impact and got injured. Nonetheless, they continued to hold their positions, though it was difficult. This only lasted for an hour before they eventually gave up. A deafening crash occurred in the air, amidst loud screaming from the people. It did not take long for the array formation to become completely broken apart, as all of them were sent across the air due to the sheer force from inside the desert. Apparently, the war from the inside went on with all its stresses and strains. Even Bai Zhe struggled to keep its balance. From what it could observe, the desert was expanding at an alarming rate again. Hastily, it gathered the people around to rejoin forces. They needed to reset the array formation as soon as possible. However, not everyone was present. At least a dozen of them were missing, including Long Sai and his master, Hua Yan. The Muscle and Lu Wu were only here to be spectators at first, but they were also nowhere to be seen after the great impact. The desert continued to extend as far as it could possibly reach, and, very soon, another city was unfortunately swallowed. People screamed for life while being helplessly engulfed by the unrelenting sandstorm. A drop-dead silence then ensued, indicating no survivors. Baizé could no longer stay calm. The whole situation was clearly out of control. At that rate, it would only take a day for the desert to engulf the entire continent, taking away tens of millions of innocent lives. It would be as good as the end of the world. Furthermore, the disappearance of Gu Shizhou and Di Fui was also very alarming. They still had not emerged from the desert, and things appeared to be getting worse. Within the desert, the demon already went crazy. Her hair danced in the gusts of winter wind. Also, her nails suddenly grew to about a foot long. When her hands moved, streaks of colorful light could be seen glowing from her fingertips, thus forming a very strong visual contrast against the black, dusty background. Evidently, she had unleashed her tremendous rage. Aghast with terror, Fan Qianzhi took a few steps back, knowing that there was no way he could fight back. It was the end. She was no longer under his control. Panicked, Fan Qianzhi could no longer keep his composure. He understood the consequences very well. Now that he could no longer keep her under control, he would eventually become her puppet. All 6 worlds would perish as a result of her madness and would eventually cease to exist. It was not what he wanted. The fight had been going on for so long, which was exhausting for him. He felt so weak and numb that he could no longer feel his limbs. Also, he did not get to extract the poison out of his body in time, so the barrier that protected his brain from being poisoned slowly lost its stability. In the meantime, the demon continued to fight with great strength. Instead of getting tired, her power actually kept increasing. When they first started their battle, his kung fu was slightly more powerful than hers. But as the battle progressed, the situation had taken a complete turn. His defeat was only a matter of time away. Chapter 30-40, The Grand Finale, 7, Bang. Carelessly, a sudden strike managed to hit him and sent him flying in the air. Coincidentally, he crashed his back against the rock that was securing the dark water prison and bounced off. The man lost consciousness momentarily due to the internal injury that he suffered. Once he shook off the pain, he tried hard to suppress the urge to vomit blood and leaped backward to buy him some time. Nevertheless, the demon closed in on him with dim streaks of 7-colored rays seen flickering on her palm. Fan Qianzhi, you are going to be my puppet. Threatened, Fan Qianzhi continued to back off until he had his back flatly on the stone that locked Gu Shizhou and Di Fui away. The demon could not see what was going on behind his back, but Gu Shizhou could see everything up close. Fan Qianzhi took the opportunity to perform a spell on his fingertip, enhanced with a drop of his blood. He then hit the wizardry barrier with the spell. Gu Shizhou had no idea what he was going to do, but she realized that the boiling dark water surged to a record high temperature, almost bursting Di Fui's protective layer of wizardry barrier. Both of them were thrown off balance and in a terrible shock. However, it was at that time that Gu Shizhou could even feel a mysterious force pulling her out. Was he trying to get her killed as well? She gave Fan Qianzhi a look of disgust, but she could only see his back. Shizhou, ignore him. Keep going. Di Fui's reminder echoed in Gu Zijia's ears. Determined, she continued to work on her tasks. Fan Qianzhi's face was filled with horror as he realized his spell did not work. The spell that he had just used was intended to pull Gu Shizhou out of the prison before the barrier was further fortified. He did not expect it to fail as it had never failed him before. The man decided to try again, seemingly not as concerned about the demon attacking him as with getting Gu Shizhou out. With another drop of blood, he cast the spell again, only to see it fail again. Are you trying to release her? The demon asked in a wicked and intimidating tone. Did your spell just fail? Ha! Fan Qianzhi, I knew that you would never let her go, the demon said with an air of complacency. You have done something to the dark water prison, haven't you? Fan Qianzhi was certain about his assumption. Have you forgotten that I am an expert in setting wizardry barriers as well? I took some time to study it and made a slight alteration. It now has an extra feature. It seemed that the fight was a sure win for her, so she was not in a hurry to defeat Fan Qianxue. Like a proud predator, she decided to provoke her prey in an unkind way. Would you like to know what the extra feature is? Fan Qianxue did not answer, but the demon insisted that he needed to know. I made it such that the soul of a lady will be trapped forever, but the soul of a man can escape. He had nothing more to say. Meanwhile, the demon threw a glance at the dark water prison where Di Fui was trapped, but the entire wizardry barrier was surrounded by a compact mass of skeletons to the point where she could not see him. The demon had no idea what the two prisoners were currently up to inside. She looked back at Fan Qianxi's terrified expression and was delighted. When I am done with you, I will get Di Fui out of the prison. He is the only one that I truly love, so I will not let him wither away in that horrible place. We shall keep each other company until the end of time. She was soft-spoken, but what came out of her mouth was brutally savage. However, you do not have to worry, Qianxue. Even when he is freed, I will still keep you alive. It will be a pleasure for you to watch as we devote ourselves to one another. Fan Qianxue was at a complete loss of words. His facial expression was filled with rage as he said with gritted teeth, I underestimated you. Chapter 30-41, The Grand Finale, 8. Although they used to be on the same team, they did not see each other very frequently. They only met once every few centuries. Every time Fan Qianxue came to visit, the demon would always do everything as he said, carefully and submissively. She did not seem like much of a thinker. Back then, he still had some doubts over the demon's unquestionable submission. Sometimes, he would linger around longer to observe her behavior to make sure that her loyalty was real. She was profoundly immoral and wicked, but the way she behaved around him was quite innocent, and sometimes, silly. Never had he thought that she had been scheming to bring about the collapse of his master plan. At this point in the dramatic exchange, Gu Shijiu and Di Fui found themselves looking at one another in dismay. Gu Shijiu teased him with half a smile, she wants to get you away so that you can spend a lifetime together with her. How sweet is that? Di Fui rubbed her hair and repeated her words with a tender voice, he wants to get you away so that you can spend a lifetime together with him. How sweet is that? The result is clear now. The demon has won the fight, which means that you are free to go, Gu Shijiu objected. Di Fui then planted a swift kiss on her soft lips and proudly said, why should we need their help? We can get out of here on our own. Without wasting time, he then used his fingers to perform a very complicated series of spells. Break it! He called out loud with full authority. All the preparations were already done. With the final set of spells being cast, all he needed was a small activation to trigger a series of chain effects that would blast them through the barrier. After a loud bang, the dark water prison, which was initially known to be invincible, was successfully breached. A surge of dark water escaped through the hole and transformed immediately into ferocious-looking spirits. They then ran amok with bare fangs and brandishing claws. Fan Qianxue was shocked, and so was the demon. In fact, even Di Fui did not see this coming. Damn it! Gu Shijiu cursed. The resentful spirits attacked in a compact mass, with an intensity that clouded the sun. It was a terrifying sight, even for Gu Shijiu. Di Fui quickly reacted by setting up another wizardry barrier around the boulder to block the spirits from swarming out. However, the barrier was not as powerful as the one that had been initially set by the demon and Fan Qianxue, so it did not work. As a piece of tape on a hissing balloon, the barrier could be seen shaking due to the powerful impact from the resentful spirits that were desperate to break free. It seemed so unstable that it could break at any time. To make matters worse, the ones that had already escaped from the prison posed real threats to Di Fui's safety. They never stopped attacking him, thus making the situation even more dangerous. There were millions of resentful spirits in the dark water prison. Some of them used to be powerful people when they were alive. In the form of evil spirits, their power remained. And in the resentment they carried, revenge was what they sought. The compact army of the dead would surely cause great and irreparable damage to the living world. It was not only the desert that would crumble but the entire world that they knew. Fan Qianzhi was the one who came up with the dark water prison, so he should be the one to look for a solution. Gu Shijiu clasped his collar and furiously demanded, "Bastard, look at what you have done. Seal the confinement immediately." She sounded exactly like a master who was reprimanding her disciple. Dumbfounded, Fan Qianzhi found it hard to believe that she was treating her like a misbehaved disciple. He grasped her by the wrist and said, "Have you recalled everything?" Gu Shijiu disregarded the pain on her wrist as his priority was for him to sort out the evil spirits. "No more nonsense. Pull it together now." Desperately, she pulled his hand away and dragged him to the boulder. Before Fan Qianzhi could answer anything, the demon's laughter could be heard echoing in the air. "Impressive, both of you. I did not expect that you would be able to put a hole through the confinement. However, you should know that the gap can no longer be sealed once the barrier is breached. Now, I can use these evil spirits as I please. They will be my strongest army in conquering the 6 worlds." Chapter 30-42, The Grand Finale, 9, Gu Shijiu almost wanted to swear at the demon. Why did everyone want to control the 6 realms so badly? Her former apprentice was so adamant about doing so, and now, her inner demon also wanted the same. It was strange. She, herself, had never had this thought. How could this demon come out with this idea? Perhaps it was because the demon was the master of the desert, therefore, these grievances were really afraid of her. They dared not attack her and only went after Di Fui, Fan Qianzhi, and Gu Shijiu. A wizardry barrier surrounded Di Fui's body, so he was all right. Nevertheless, Gu Shijiu was seriously injured, and her skill was currently the weakest among them. When she saw hundreds of grievances rushing over, she was about to pull out her sword, but Fan Qianzhi suddenly pulled her behind him. He raised his hand and attacked the grievances away. Then, he quickly created a wizardry barrier around them. Before they had time to talk, there was a loud bang from the ground. A pink shell drilled out from the ground and said, "Mother, I want to die." Before it finished its sentence, it shouted, "What are these? Why are there so many grievances?" It slammed its shell shut at once as it saw the grievances rush towards its shell. They attacked its shell to the point where it looked like a bumpy boat passing over a large wave. Muscle. Lu Wu. Long sigh. Gu Zijia's eyes were sharp. In fact, when the mussel opened its shell, she saw there was a lady behind them, as well as an animal that looked like a black snake. However, as the mussel closed its shell too fast, she did not see the appearance of the black snake clearly. Although the shell of the mussel was thick and strong, it was undoubtedly impossible to defend against the attacks from so many grievances. After a moment, they heard the screams of the mussel, "It's over. It hurts. My shell is damaged. It's going to break." Gu Shijiu was speechless. Fan Qianzhi immediately rushed forward in the wizardry barrier to chase away the grievances that had been attacking the big mussel's shell and then got it into the barrier. The barrier he made was neither too big nor too small, it was about the size of a room. At the moment, the mussel itself accounted for most of the space, it opened its shell in shock. Lu Wu, Long Sai, and Hua Yan jumped out of its shell one by one, and finally, the black snake glided out slowly, and then it shook and changed its appearance. Not only did horns grow on its head, but a small lantern also emerged. It was the Black Candle Dragon. These people and beasts who would never associate with one another, so Gu Shijiu was stunned. Before she could react, the big mussel had already plunged to her feet, using its shell to clip her skirt. "Master? How did you become like this? Are you seriously injured? Which bastard hurt you? Hu, you look so ugly." Gu Shijiu was speechless for a moment. It did not take long for Lu Wu to rush over and turned into its human form. It was now a 12-year-old boy that looked particularly furious. "Master, which bastard hurt you like this? Tell Lu Wu. Lu Wu will get revenge for you." Meanwhile, Long Sai stepped forward and wanted to diagnose her pulse. "Shijiu, let me check on you." At the same time, the Black Candle Dragon raced forward to the front of Fan Qianzhi. It looked up at the whistling spirit outside the barrier and said, "What is going on?" Hua Yan stood in a corner, and her eyes swept over to Fan Qianshi. She paused for a moment before walking over to him. "Master." Long Sai, on the other side, became a little stiff. He watched Hua Yan as she approached Fan Qianshi, but the lady did not look back at him. Chapter 3043, The Grand Finale, 10. The only way to describe the current situation was chaotic. Fortunately, the mussel had a quick mouth, so it was able to convey the entire situation outside in a matter of minutes. It turned out that when things got out of control, the mussel had been swept away by a massive vortex from the desert. That vortex seemed to shatter everything into dust and absorbed the mussel into its grasp. Inside, it happened to meet Long Sai and Hua Yan. Hua Yan and Long Sai teamed up to set up a wizardry barrier to protect the people and the beasts who got sucked in, but they could not find a way to escape. Meanwhile, they watched the other people who got caught turn into dust. Everything had happened in less than half a minute, and by then, the wizardry barrier that was supporting them seemed to be in jeopardy. Just when it was about to burst, a candle dragon came into the whirlpool. This candle dragon immediately protected itself using its own wizardry barrier but continued to roll around inside. Moments later, they found themselves inside the desert. At that time, the candle dragon was too tired to move and lay on the ground. Long Sai and Hua Yan were also exhausted and could barely move. In the desert, the howling winds like knives while the sand was like bullets. The pain was getting unbearable, and there was no place to hide here. Therefore, the mussel protected everyone in its shell and then performed the ground drilling technique. That was how this group of people and creatures turned up together over here. The grievances outside the wizardry barrier roared continuously during the story. They looked frightening and dangerous. Meanwhile, the atmosphere inside the wizardry barrier was strange. Long Sai, the mussel, and Lu Wu kept their guard up at the sight of Fan Qianshi. However, Hua Yan and the Black Candle Dragon were very close to Fan Qianshi. Apparently, one was his subordinate, and the other was his pet. Fan Qianshi frowned as he spoke to Hua Yan very bluntly, "Bitch, who asked you to come? I told you to leave me alone." Hua Yan looked down at the ground in disappointment. Next, Fan Qianshi looked at Long Sai. The man's gaze had already fallen on Hua Yan as his handsome face turned green. Long Sai was undoubtedly intelligent. When he saw the interaction between Hua Yan and Fan Qianshi, he could guess Hua Yan's true identity. He coldly said, "You are Wu Wuyan." Hua Yan did not deny. "Yes." Long Sai did not say anything more. He wanted to ask some questions like, "Is he the one who sent you? And, what did you want to get from me this time?" However, he never got an answer in the past, so he did not bother. He just sighed in disappointment as he looked at Hua Yan coldly. Fan Qianshi frowned as his eyes looked sharply at Long Sai. "What are you thinking about now? Wu Wuyan went to you because she likes you. I did not send her." Long Sai looked back at him and sneered. However, he did not say anything. Obviously, he did not believe it at all. Furthermore, his feelings toward Fan Qianshi were actually very complicated. He was cloned from the body cells of Fan Qianshi when he reincarnated as Long Fan. In fact, he was Long Sai's father for several years. Before Long Sai knew that he was a clone, he thought that Long Fan was his father. The man had treated him ruthlessly. However, it was undeniable that he taught him a lot of skills. Whether it was medical skills or martial arts, they were all taught to him by Long Fan. Later, Long Sai died and received a new body. Theoretically, he was no longer a clone and was raised by real parents. However, his appearance was not much different from his previous life. Since then, he always wondered if he was still carrying Long Fan's genes. Back in the Starry Crescent land, Long Fan manipulated him like a chess piece and almost ended his life while trying to get even with Di Fui and Gu Shijiu. Chapter 3044, The Grand Finale, 11. The last incident made Long Sai resent him but also made him rather confused about himself. If it were possible, he did not want to see Fan Qianshi ever again. Therefore, it was rather confusing to him that the man refused to let him go until today and had to send Wu Wuyan undercover to monitor him. What did he want from him this time? What other role did he have in Fan Qianqi's grand scheme? Long Sai just came into the desert, so he was still very confused. The whistling spirits outside the barrier made him scared, and he realized that his personal emotions should be insignificant at this time. He looked around to analyze the scene, and suddenly, his pupils shrunk. Through the dense whistling grievances, he saw Di Fui not too far away. He also saw Gu Zijia's inner demon. Di Fui was struggling to support a barrier that he placed on a large stone. From the rock's crevices, there was black water spitting out from time to time. As the water came out, it happened to turn into evil spirits almost instantaneously. Apparently, this was the source of the evil grievances in the area. At this time, the demonized Gu Shijiu was very close to Di Fui. Fui, you don't have to tire yourself over this matter. You cannot stop it. They will all come out and become my established army. She opened her arms and flew around the place as if to welcome her new army members. The grievances did not bite her but danced along with the movement of her sleeves. Then, she turned her head and looked at Gu Shijiu. I did not want to seal her away for a long time. In fact, she would have disintegrated in 3 years. The prison would have also lost its structural integrity, and the grievances would have become my army. Alas, my army's strength is lower than I had expected because they did not get the chance to feast on her. Although she was using Gu Zijia's body, the tone of her speech was very different. It was a lot sweeter than Gu Zijia's normal voice but sounded cruel and cold. Meanwhile, Di Fui's face appeared pale. He knew in his heart that he could not stop it with his current abilities. Once these grievances broke through the barrier, they would swallow the whole world. Typically with these sorts of grievances, they would only multiply after being attacked. The only way to get rid of them was to purify them. Perhaps, the only way to do so was to restore his identity as the master of the heavenly law. Gu Shijiu seemed to have thought of this as well. She stared at Fan Qianshi angrily and said, Fan Qianshi, are you just going to stand there and watch? Do you want the 6 realms to be destroyed? Didn't you want to be the master of the 6 realms? If you let this calamity happen, how can you rule the 6 worlds? Fan Qianshi bit his lips tightly after hearing her out. He looked at the roaring grievances outside and suddenly laughed. What does it matter to me if the 6 realms are destroyed? Let it be. Let it be destroyed. At that time, Di Fui had given up on holding the barrier. If Fan Qianshi killed Di Fui, he would only restore him as the master of the heavenly law in advance. Nevertheless, the 6 realms still belonged to him. As for Gu Shijiu, from the beginning to the end, she still loved Di Fui, and eventually, she would always belong to Di Fui. There was never a place for him in her heart, and he could not get rid of her. He knew that she was heartless, but he just could not see her in distress. However, all his efforts in saving her ended up hurting his feelings even further. After all, she never looked upon him favorably. He had been working so hard for so many years, but he still got nothing in the end. Chapter 30-45, The Grand Finale, 12. Since he was destined to be disappointed, he would rather let the world be ruined. Fan Qianqi's thoughts turned negative as he now wanted to see the world crash and burn with Di Fui exhausting all of his power as the master of the heavenly law. He suddenly approached Gu Shijiu and sneered. Gu Shijiu, this is the price for how you treated me in the past. You should enjoy every moment of it. Gu Shijiu remained silent. She felt that the man was such a rascal. She could not help but look at Di Fui and clench her fists. The demon was now bullying Di Fui from very close proximity and laughing like an evil creature. Fui, don't you want to give up? Then, her thin and long fingers pointed at Gu Shijiu. This woman does not suit you. I am the only one in this world that will be loyal to you. Do you want to watch me kill this woman? Her long finger flicked towards Gu Shijiu, and all of a sudden, there were 17 or 18 blood-like shadows that were charging toward Fan Qianqi's wizardry barrier. Meanwhile, The other grievances that were pounding on the barrier noticed the blood-red shadows coming over and quickly fled. It was obvious that whatever was coming toward them was more powerful than the ones before them. These fierce grievances must have been formed from the masters who had suffered in the desert. Just one of these fierce grievances was even more potent than 1,000 typical grievances. The rigidity of the wizardry barrier was already a concern for them earlier, but now, there was a visible crack in the barrier. It seemed that it was going to be shattered at any time. The muscle was anxious. Hold up. Hold on. It quickly opened the shell and said, "Everyone, come inside my shell to hide. I will take you to underground, ha ha ha." A little muscle that thinks that it can turn the situation around? Why don't you try drilling into the ground again? Since you had drilled out before, why not try again? Every one of you has to die. No one is allowed to survive. The devil laughed as she sentenced them. Di Fui was in a hurry and was slightly distracted by the inner demon. The barrier that he had set around the boulder had also cracked, questioning its structural integrity. The demon brought herself even closer to Di Fui now and grabbed his arm. Fui, but before she could finish her sentence, she suddenly screamed piercingly. It was exceptionally loud and seemed to trigger the other grievances as well. Everyone was taken aback and quickly turned their attention to her. They saw a white shadow emerging out of her body as she was screaming in pain. It seemed as though both the body and the shadow were in pain at the same time. The white shadow was obviously forced out of Gu Zijia's body. It swayed in the air for a moment before landing awkwardly on the ground. It was now in the same form as the woman in white from before. Di Fui was holding Gu Zijia's body in his hand while casting a spell to put her soul back into her body. It was evident from the reaction of the woman in white that this was completely unexpected. Coincidentally, Fan Qianxi's wizardry barrier had also been destroyed right about the same time. Fortunately, Di Fui's movements were faster than those grievances. He waved his sleeve in the direction of Gu Shijiu, and her soul seemed to be pulled toward him. Her entire vision had turned black for a moment, and when she opened her eyes, she had already returned to her body. It all happened too quickly that no one had no time to react. Even the muscle still had its shell open while Lu Wu was certainly dumbstruck by what had happened. Lu Wu turned to look at Long Sai, Fan Qianshi, Hua Yan, and the black candle dragon together that were equally shocked in the shell of the muscle. Di Fui only said 2 words, ground drilling. The muscle was speechless. It was overloaded. Nevertheless, its response was still fast. It immediately closed its shell, turned around, and sneaked into the ground. In just a second, it had disappeared. Meanwhile, the demon's pretty face had turned green. She cursed angrily, "Bastards! You can't run away from me." The desert only allowed people in, so the only way they could escape was if Fan Qianshi was willing to tell them how to do so. The muscle was full of doubts. It was alright to rescue Long Sai. But why did they have to save the big bad guy, Fan Qianshi? Was Celestial Masters were practicing Buddhism now? Nonetheless, it did not have time to question Di Fui's instructions and had to concentrate on driving them to safety. Chapter 3046, The Grand Finale, 13, Inside the shell of the muscle, Di Fui closed his eyes with Gu Shijiu sat beside him. The man was exercising his inner power to get rid of the evil inside her body. The demon had used her body for quite a long time to the point where there was demonic energy immersed in her limbs. Hence, now that she was back in her own body, she still felt quite uncomfortable. Fortunately, the channeling of the evil energy out of her body did not need her to meditate, as it would not be safe for them to have to meditate now. Thinking about the situation, she asked Long Sai about the events outside of the desert. Long Sai did not hide anything from her as he revealed the calamity that had been taking place just outside the desert. Hearing the news made Gu Shijiu frown. She knew the level of ability of the people outside the barrier. If they were truly united, they certainly had the power to turn the 6 realms around. Although she had never personally seen the big array, since Di Fui designed it, it must be compelling. Theoretically, if these people worked together, they could easily seal away a hole in the sky. However, the desert seemed to be too much for them to handle. How can we break out of this evil desert? She turned to look at Fan Qianxue. Fan Qianxue closed his eyes and answered coldly, I don't know. This desert was created by you. How can you not know? When I said I don't know, it means I don't know. However, even if I know, I will never tell you. Fan Qianxue still spoke coldly to them. Fan Qianxue, if the desert is not destroyed, all 6 realms will be erased from existence. Do you really want to see it being ruined? Long Sai could not help but open his mouth. What does it have to do with me if it is ruined? Fan Qianxue was still stubborn. If I knew you would behave this way earlier, I wouldn't have saved you and would have left you behind to be eaten by those grievances. Lu Wu was angry and shouted at the man. Fan Qianxue answered it coldly, I never asked for you to rescue me. If you regret your decision, I am happy to step out of this shell right now. Lu Wu and Long Sai were speechless. Lu Wu really wanted to ask the mussel to open its shell and throw this bastard out. The mere sight of him was already unsettling. Fan Qianxi, this desert is now useless to you. Fui and I have already escaped from the prison, so your plan has failed. This desert cannot really trap us, and I can easily leave with him. Therefore, keeping this desert around is only hurting the innocent people from the 6 realms, Gu Shizhou tried to explain to him. Fan Qianxue was still cold. Have you heard a saying that something that hurts others is not necessarily beneficial to oneself? Everyone was speechless. Long Sai, Lu Wu, and even Little Black tried to persuade him. Nonetheless, Fan Qianxue was as stubborn as a stone. He would not tell them how to escape. Finally, Gu Shizhou asked, Fan Qianxue, tell us your condition. What do you want in exchange for the information? Fan Qianxue raised his eyebrows and looked at Gu Shizhou. Why don't you tell me? What offer can you give me? Gu Shizhou was stunned for a moment by his reply. If you can tell us the way to stop this catastrophe, we can forgive everything that you have done before, even after Fui returns as master of the heavenly law. He will not look for revenge. Furthermore, you can continue to be the god of creation, as long as you promise not to harm the 6 realms in the future. This offer could be said to be very generous. With the sins that he had committed, this was definitely a big win for him. Based on what Gu Shizhou understood, the reason why Fan Qianxue was so ruthless to kill Di Fui this time was that he was afraid that Di Fui would punish and kill him after he returned as the master of the heavenly law. Hua Yan hesitated. Gu Shizhou, can you really make this decision on behalf of Di Fui? Chapter 3047, The Grand Finale, 14, I know I can. Hua Yan immediately looked at Fan Qianxue and tried to persuade him, Master. To which Fan Qianxue replied, Shut up. You are not qualified to change my decision. Hua Yan's pretty face turned pale in an instant. She looked down and did not utter another word. The Black Candle Dragon could not help but give it a go. Master, what do you want this time? You told me before that a wise man would know how to make a judgment based on every situation. When it is your turn to be wise, why are you so stubborn? Is your brain damaged? You are usually not so stubborn. Fan Qianxue laughed at the Black Candle Dragon, but his eyes did not seem to joke when he replied, Unless you turn back time and treat me as a real apprentice, I will not be able to let it go. I am absolutely disgusted by how you used me in the past. Gu Shizhou was speechless. Meanwhile, Fan Qianxue laughed even louder. I know that you can't do it. So, there is nothing else to be discussed. In the darkness, a deep voice could suddenly be heard. You don't have to go back in time. She used to treat you well as her apprentice. In fact, she never used you. On the contrary, she did a lot for you. The voice was magnetically clear. It was very calming but also seemed slightly regretful. Everyone was startled by the sudden emergence of the voice. Gu Shizhou and Di Fui were both stunned for a moment as they felt that they could recognize the voice but could not seem to put an image to it. Who are you? Who is the one talking nonsense? Fan Qianxue suddenly opened his eyes. The voice did not reply, but the mussel, that was busy drilling a path, suddenly screamed. Its huge body seemed to be sucked up the surface. Ah! Ah! Who is pulling me? Gosh, we are going up. We are going up quickly. Where is this? Did we drill out of the desert already? The scenery was no longer in the endless desert. Instead, they could see the starry sky. The stars seemed to be sparkling in the night sky. In fact, these stars were not the real stars in the sky. They were like stones that carried a light with them. The place seemed vast and endless. Where was this place? Long Sai, Hua Yan, the Muscle, Lu Wu, and the Candle Dragon were all stunned by the sight in front of them. They dared not speak at the moment. However, Fan Qianqi's felt as though a hammer had repeatedly been pounding on his heart. It looked like the forbidden land of God. But was it possible? The forbidden land of God had long disappeared. How could it suddenly appear here again? It did not make any sense. Fan Qianqi's memory of his past life had not been fully restored. Nevertheless, he remembered the time when he and Di Fui came to this forbidden place and that it had exploded. The explosion was too powerful that no one could stop it. When they realized that the place had been destroyed, it seemed that everyone had forgotten that Gu Shijiu was the god of creation. Fan Qianshi only remembered it later on and almost vomited blood. The mere memory of it was enough to cause him great pain and made him feel nauseous. Meanwhile, right after he woke up, he realized that he was the god of creation while Di Fui was the master of the heavenly law. From then on, both of them managed the beings of the 6 realms together. Perhaps, because he had been too obsessed with Gu Shijiu, he started to dream about his past life, piece by piece. Slowly, he was able to put everything together about his past life. The first place he wanted to find was the forbidden land of God. However, it became clear to him that he could no longer find it. He started to doubt whether its existence was only a rumor, but seeing it now made him realize that it was not. Chapter 30-48, The Grand Finale, 15. The man was certainly startled as he felt an unspeakable feeling of grief engulf his heart. Gu Shijiu was also startled for a moment. After she saw everything here clearly, her heart was drowned by a feeling of sadness, though she did not know why. The sadness was overwhelming to the point where she suddenly felt like letting go of everything. All these emotions seemed to have struck her at once, and she did not know how to disentangle it. She subconsciously turned to look at Di Fui for an answer and noticed that his face was terribly pale. Fui. She grabbed his arm, and Di Fui suddenly hugged her. When he was about to say something, the muscle suddenly uttered a cry. The demon is here. The demon is here. Everyone was shocked and subconsciously looked in the direction where the muscle pointed. They could not believe their eyes. A woman in white appeared out of nowhere and seemed to be rushing forward along a star-like path. The woman certainly looked very similar to the demon, but everyone soon distinguished that this woman was not the demon that they had encountered in the desert because this woman was covered with an auspicious aura. There was no evil aura around her. She was a divine being. Not the demon. Fan Qianshi seemed to realize something as he suddenly stepped forward. Master. Nevertheless, the woman did not seem to see him at all. It seemed that she did not know that anyone else was present either. She just continued her journey forward. Was this an illusion? Everyone looked at each other and followed the woman to see where she was going. There was a large and magnificent hall in front of her, surrounded by colorful light. It was clear to them that this was a temple of God. The woman appeared to have run straight into the temple and disappeared from sight. Gu Shijiu and Di Fui looked at each other first and naturally followed. Meanwhile, the muscle, Long Sai, Hua Yan, and others appeared to be blocked by a wizardry barrier, so they could not go any further. Fan Qianshi stopped in front of the entrance and contemplated. This temple. It was the temple where he became the god of creation. He remembered that he seemed to have inherited a lot of skills and knowledge about the god of creation inside the temple. He was feeling very emotional in his heart but decided to take a leap of faith and walk into the hall. Meanwhile, the muscle was wondering how it could enter the hall as well. It used its shell to try to break in, but it did not seem to be effective. Is this barrier specifically set to block us? How could they enter without any resistance? Later, it started to worry, are we being left behind? Hua Yan seemed to realize something. Maybe it only admits the relevant people, perhaps, we are not qualified. Well, that sounded plausible. After all, out of the 3 people who entered, 2 were gods of creation, and the other was the master of the heavenly law. Long Sai sat quietly on the ground and said, let's wait for them here. Inside the temple, there was no furniture in the hall, only a vast array of stars that were arranged in a pattern. The woman turned left and right in a big circle and finally put a beautiful stone-like moonlight into the array. Then, she had sighed gently as she muttered, finally, it is a successful arrangement. After I immortalize, Qianshi will be able to inherit my abilities. Fan Qianshi's body froze, and his face turned pale upon hearing what the woman had said. Did she arrange this starry array? Was it not prepared by God, especially for God of creation? He knew that he obtained his abilities from this big array. He remembered that when he accidentally stumbled into the area, he was monetarily trapped. He could not seem to escape from it but also could not die. Just when he was exhausted to the point where his skin had almost peeled off, he finally got out from the array and possessed the abilities specifically set aside for the God of creation. Chapter 30-49, The Grand Finale, 16. He always thought that this array was created by God, especially for God of creation, but he never expected that his master explicitly designed this for him. It could not be true, could it? Perhaps, all this had happened before she met Di Fui. At the time, she did treat him well, at least she treated him as her disciple. Furthermore, this might be an illusion that Di Fui specially created for him to trick him into revealing the solution to the desert. They would not fool him. Humph. He turned to look at Di Fui, but Di Fui was completely focused on the woman in white. His face was pale, and he did not know how to describe what was going through his mind. Gu Shizhou sat beside him, and her eyes were also locked on the woman in white. She seemed to be deep in her own thoughts. Was this her past life? In her past, it seemed that she had treated Fan Qianshi quite well. Even before she immortalized, she still thought about him and did this for him. Why did Fan Qianshi seek revenge on her the entire time as if she ruined his family's grave? After the woman in white put down the big stone, she was a little bit tired. She sat down on a rock and looked around before looking back down at her own hands. She sighed and said, I wonder if Qianshi has already hatched the baby candle dragon. Unfortunately, I am not going to be able to see it. In fact, I really want to see the little candle dragon. I hope that the little candle dragon is not as stubborn as he is. Her voice was soft and seemed to be filled with regret. She sat there with her hand supporting her chin and seemed to think about something else for a moment before shaking her head. This kid is an absolute genius, but unfortunately, he is too stubborn. Once he focuses on something, he will never turn back, and to me, he is. Sigh. I tried to correct him, but it didn't work. I deliberately ignored him and punished him because I wanted him to focus on his practice and quickly grow before I am immortalized. After that, I can't be with him any longer. At first, I thought of bringing him here before I immortalized to tell him about the taboos here. Unfortunately, he would not be able to survive here with his current abilities. It can only be like this for now. Fan Qianshi's face went pale. He was now focused on the woman as well. He opened his mouth slightly as if he wanted to say something but hesitated. Fake. She was fake. This was an illusion. It must have been created by Di Fui. He wanted to quickly cast a spell to destroy the confusion in his heart. The man had pinched his fingers together but somehow struggled to utter the words that he needed to say. At that moment, the woman took out a jade piece. Fan Qianshi's eyes suddenly shrank upon seeing it. In fact, he felt as though something had crashed into his head. He recognized this jade piece at once. It was a beautiful jade that he had personally collected when he was young. As the jade looked like a human, he had an idea and carefully carved a jade statue of Gu Shizhou. He clearly remembered that the jade statue was lifelike and had facial features that were just like Gu Shizhou. He had kept it with him secretly for so many years. The man often held her jade statue when he missed her, but he did not dare to let her know about it. It was only when he was seriously injured one time that she accidentally discovered this jade statue when she was trying to heal him. She was stunned at the time, and Fan Qianqi's face had turned red. He was worried that Gu Shizhou would get angry. Unexpectedly, she turned the jade statue in her hand and praised him. "Did you carve it for me? The carving is good. It seems like my apprentice has a pair of skillful hands. However, I think your first priority should be to practice. After you complete your practice, you can continue with these crafts, okay?" He responded with great courage, "Master, I feel that my skills are high enough." "Master, do you think I am not strong enough?"